and welcome to Felt Matters, the podcast on all things felting, brought to you by the International Felt Makers Association. And we are your hosts. I'm Vivienne Morpeth, coming to you from sunny Lincolnshire in England.
And I'm Heather Potten in the lovely city of Edinburgh in Scotland.
It's really nice to be just us because we've had some incredible interviews with amazing felt makers, which has totally inspired us, and I hope we hope our listeners.
Yes.
But equally, we have so much to talk about. You and I could talk for hours now.
We're actually saying now is the beginning of episode 4 of season 3, and we have already been talking for at least half an hour. So,
well, we had to remind ourselves, didn't we? But
yes.
you've been doing some really interesting research and thinking, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this idea for a project, but it's based on your childhood, really, and some beautiful brooches that you have in your possession.
Mm-hmm.
How does that all come about?
Well, last year I went back to Orkney for the first time since 1992. And that's a long time, but in fact, my story and my connection to Orkney goes back to, well, childhood. In 1968, when I was 8, so there we go, there's my age. In 1968, my grandmother, who had been widowed quite young, rekindled a relationship with an old, I think it was a primary school flame, Dr. Jim Cromarty in Stromness, who was at that point now a doctor, very well respected doctor, and also a widower. And my grandmother and he reconnected, so I presume by letter, because there wouldn't have been any emails at that point. And they got married in 1968, and my grandmother was able to move back to Stromness, which is where my father had been born. So from 1968 onwards, every year, I spent Easters and latterly summers in Orkney. And at that time, we were growing up as a family, and my mother used to buy jewellery from a jeweller called Ola Gorie. And so I still have that jewellery.
Yes.
I think I may have got rid of 1 or 2 small pieces, but for the main part, I still have it. And I also have 1 or 2 pieces that she bought for me. But it's only very recently that I've appreciated. My mother was quite forward-looking because she bought this jewelry when, in fact, it was very new on the market, and so I started to research a little bit about Ola Gorie, and she was an inspirational jeweler from the 1960s who drew upon her Celtic and Norse heritage to make her designs. And she went to the Gray's School of Art in Aberdeen. She graduated in 1960 as the first person who had studied jewelry design.
That's amazing, isn't it?
But what I think is fascinating about Ola Gorie, apart from the fact that she was just a groundbreaking innovator, was the fact that she used Celtic designs.
Mm. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, you talked about going to Orkney as a child and what your childhood impressions are of the island. Because it's very remote and not many trees, and so different to mainland Scotland, where you were coming from Edinburgh.
Well, yes. I mean, I grew up in Edinburgh because my father got a job at the British Geological Institute in Edinburgh, and what I remember very clearly is the trip up, because at that time we had a Morris Traveller. It was a hatchback and it had a wooden frame, and it had it had the indicators that came out at the side of the car and stuck out, my brother and I would sleep in the back of this car, and we drove up to Helmsdale, which is fairly far up on the East Coast, spent our nights there in a bed and breakfast, and then would drive to Scrabster to get onto the St. Ola.
St. Ola, so that's the same name.
It's the same name.
It's very unusual, isn't it?
It's an unusual name. And the Ola, the St. Ola at that time was quite a frightening experience, because it took about 4 hours. And the way to get...
choppy?
Oh, God, yes. It's incredibly... Yes, it's incredibly choppy and exposed. And there wasn't a roll-on, roll-off ferry as there is now. Basically, my father would have to drive the car into a large net. The
Wow.
net was then winched up over into the hold of the
Oh my
um
goodness.
yeah, and then so yeah, you literally, it was like a big amount of fish being dropped into the hold, and then you would get into the ferry, and every single piece of furniture had a chain underneath it, and it was attached to the floor
Yeah.
because the movement of the ship was so extreme that all the tables and chairs would swing from one side to the other. And my mother would just stay inside and be sick. And my father
I'd be with her.
yeah, well, my father and I would go and lean over the rail and
Yeah,
just get as much of the surf and the wind
yeah.
and everything
Look
in
at
our
the
faces.
horizon, which is what you're meant to do
And we
apparently, but
didn't get sick, and we would go past the Old Man of Hoy, and it took about 4 hours, and it was really, it was a
what an
huge
extraordinary experience.
trip. And the only time that it was too rough for the Ola, believe it or not, Loganair took us over by plane. It was an 8-seater. And then it was, one minute you could see the sea, and the next minute you saw the air, and the next minute you saw the sea, and it was horrible. And then, of course, we didn't have our car with us, so we then had to borrow my Uncle Jim, as we called him, my grandmother's second husband's old Morris that was in the garage and was never ever used. So this little pristine antique little car that we drove around
With children.
with children. Yes. So yeah, Orkney was a huge experience for me. And then my great uncle and aunt bought a derelict watermill, and she was an architect, and they transformed it into a craft shop and
Yes.
a restaurant. And I used
Wow.
to work there. And my aunt, great aunt Joan, she would go to all the trade fairs, just much as Ola
Yes.
Gorie did. So
Yeah.
Ola Gorie went to sell her work. My aunt Joan and Ronnie, they would go to these trade fairs and bring back knitwear, Shetland knitwear, new ceramics, ceramicists. My aunt was willing to take risks and punts. So for example, Andrew Appleby, the potter, he moved to Orkney and she bought his early stuff. Um, and so I would work in the craft shop, and I also worked in the restaurant. And it was directly opposite Maze How. And Maze How dragon is one of the big motifs from
Oh,
Orcadian mythology, and was incorporated into Ola Gorie's jewellery as well. So for me, all of these symbols, and you were talking about the landscape. Skara Brae is the sort of Neolithic village there. And then you could just run around inside it. I mean,
really?
yeah, it's a little village, and you got a little tunnels and walkways and stuff, and you could go inside it and just play.
How extraordinary.
When I went back in last May, and I was talking to people, and I mentioned Tormiston Mill, which is the mill that my aunt and uncle bought, everybody had a story about Tormiston Mill. So I met somebody
How
who was
wonderful.
the first person to get married there. And other people said, "Oh, you would have worked with my mother. She worked there as well." And
Gosh.
and I also, incredibly, met Ola Gorie's son, because there is a dig there which has actually just been covered over, called the Ness of Broadgar. And as I was walking past there, a man stopped in his car and said, "Oh, it's closed at the moment. It'll be open in the summer, and then that's it. It'll be filled in." And I said, "Well, I realized that." And he said, "Well, the land belonged to his mother, and his mother was Ola, and his mother was Ola Gorie. And so she owns the land that the Ness of Broadgar uh, is on." So she's
How
now in her
extraordinary.
80s. She's now in her 80s, and is still traveling, and still designing.
And do you feel this, strong pull, this Celtic pull towards these designs and the sort of the atmosphere of, the mythology and, the cultural history of the place?
I've always, since I was a child, loved fairy tales, and mythology, and still I'm drawn to a sort of magical other world. So I suppose yes.
I mean, you obviously have this strong family and emotional connection with Orkney, trying to express that through felt or respond to that through felt. And the fact that your mother left you this jewellery, you feel you feel an urge to respond to that jewellery. It was extraordinary that you met the jeweller's son when you went there. And all of the synchronicity, nothing is a coincidence in life. There is opportunities that you have to seize and you have to recognise them. And this is an opportunity where all of this is coming together. And as people in our 60s, we kind of look back a little bit on our childhood and we recognise, gosh, that was a really extraordinary start to life. And what a gift my mother gave me. And I didn't recognise it so much at the time, but now I'm looking at this jewellery, and of course, jewellery like that is so much more valued now. And when we look on eBay, they're still worth a lot. There's a great deal of interest in the stories of the past and how Orkney, its history is told a lot through stories, like you say, fairy stories, legends, the myths and the Celtic history. And you want to, combining that with how you know to express yourself, which is through felt, and the joy of us being together and you sharing your enthusiasm. I wanted to explore it too. And just working through these ideas.
I feel very often that I am not I'm not an artist in that I set out with a sketchbook, or I do take photographs, but I never think to myself, I am doing this in order to create a piece of work, and I never have. And I suppose that's because I've never considered myself to be an artist. And recently I've just noticed, oh, there's a connection, there's a connection, there's a connection. So I suppose that's what going back to Orkney has brought me, because I always knew that the Orkney experience as a child, and particularly working at Tormiston Mill, I always knew that that was very important. All through my life, it's been very important. As far as the Ola Gorie jewellery is concerned, that jewellery has sat in boxes for years and years. And it's only recently that I actually, sort of collected it all together, polished it up, had a look at it, and thought, this is really beautiful.
Yes.
So
and it looks beautiful when you showed me, when you brought it down and laid it on the table. I mean, I know
yes,
you only brought some of the pieces,
yeah,
but they are exquisite.
yes. And then you read about Ola Gorie and you see the importance of, her life and her contribution to art and to the dissemination of the Scottish story, the Scottish
Yes.
heritage. Yeah.
And you have these beautiful pieces of jewellery
Yes.
and these memories.
That's true. So I didn't really expect that this would happen, but we are actually in the same studio, and it's not virtual, it's real, and it's yours.
And it's so lovely to welcome you to my studio, Heather.
It's super.
I mean, this used to be the tack room, because it was a little room and it had a beautiful fireplace with little tiles on it, chimney and everything. But it was totally derelict.
Right.
When we
did it have a roof?
It had a roof, but there were gaps in the roof, and there were gaps in the walls.
Yeah.
And it's been totally rebuilt in the footprint, the same height, the same width, everything. But what I do have is 3 floor-to-ceiling windows. Doors.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
Three French doors,
yes,
rather than windows and walls. So it's a little bit of a luxury. A little bit nippy in the winter, but perfect on a day like this, because it's a lovely sunny Lincolnshire day.
It is. You keep banging on about those, but
they do exist. We're in one now.
So we're going to actually try and make some samples, and we're focusing on Orcadian motifs.
And we're going to start with a 30 centimetre square. So pop that on your piece of paper.
All right.
And you can fold over one side.
Oh, I see.
Put it one end. That is your 30 centimetre square.
Right. Yes, we have to be disciplined. But we're going to be stopping for lunch fairly soon, so that's good. We haven't even got started, but we're still going to have lunch.
Had a coffee and the tea.
That's right, I know. And the thing is, if you start gossiping, then So are these scissors okay for paper?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Because I like to cut things rather than just fold.
Sure.
Is that okay?
So I'm tucking my paper underneath my bubble wrap. Do you think this is going to be big enough, actually? 30 centimetres? It's very tiny.
It is.
I mean, maybe we want the end result to be 30 centimetres and we should be multiplying it up.
Mm-hmm.
We're researching some ideas here to practice various theories.
Yes.
So we've taken designs that we've seen online from jewellery. Well, I have.
So was that from Ola Gorie?
It is actually.
Yeah. Because
beautiful birds.
it's funny. As soon as I saw that sketch, I immediately thought of a pair of earrings that I had, which were Ola Gorie earrings that my mother had given me. Your impressionistic drawing of that motif immediately suggested those earrings. So it's definitely got that flavour.
And yeah, absolutely. And now I'm, would you say, deconstructing the design? I've drawn it, I've enlarged it.
Yes.
And now I'm cutting out sections of it and having space in between. And at the moment, it's looking like fish bones and even whale bones.
Yeah, it looks like a rib cage.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which may be what it ends up looking like, but I doubt it because you've got head and tail there as well, haven't you?
I do, yes. No, I'm definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the head will have an eye in it, so that'll definitely.
Well, interestingly, I have got a motif and I'm struggling to enlarge it. So I think what I'm doing is I'm going to lay out my background. I'm going to do a 4-layer background because I'm thinking of a sample which will end up being something quite structural. So I want to...
Oh, that sounds fantastic, Heather.
I want to make it quite solid and I want to see how the motif survives the shrinkage, basically.
And you're going to use, did you say 4 layers?
4 layers,
Yeah.
yep. So I'm just going to lay that out first. So I've got this wonderful pre-made bat, which is super because you did it and I didn't have to do any work. So that's the benefit of being in someone else's studio. They just give you lots of wool to work with. Oh, excellent.
There's more here.
So I've got a blend of orange, pink, dark red, bit purple, just my colours really.
And there is as much wool as I could get on my carder.
Right.
So when I work with these, I tend to kind of
Split
open them out.
Yes. Yeah.
There's probably, I did measure it. There's a lot, something like 50 grams or something.
50 grams. Oh well, yes. I certainly won't be needing 50
Merino
grams.
terms. Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I should really weigh each.
Do you want to?
Well, it's probably quite a good.
Well, it seems with sampling, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I will weigh each layer. And
You have to fiddle around with that.
Thank you.
That to get it to work properly.
All right, so that's what I'm doing now, and we will come back to this in a moment. So you've got an ideal opportunity to talk now because I'm in the middle of counting.
Okay, well, you concentrate on counting and
Okay.
I'll try not to say something that
Just
will make
keep
you
going.
want to join in.
Well, I'm at 50 and I'm doing 100 rolls north, south, east, west. Then I'm going to flip it over and do the same. And then I'll have a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do the same again without.
When I've done my 800, I stop rolling and I
Stop manipulating.
But I don't rub it with my hands. I make it move across the surface.
Yeah. Well, because I've got this pre-felt design, which I don't want to move at all, I want it to be really stable before I start doing that.
Okay, so then lots of rolling is a good
For me,
shout.
yes. That works for me. So anyway, I'm on 50, so I'm going to go into 51 and I'll
So
let
this
you...
is you not talking, Heather.
Well,
This is my turn to talk.
This is a prelude to me not talking. So as we go, 51.
Well, I'm looking at my design here, which is a cutout of a bird, but not a bird as we know it. And it's not looking quite right. I put little shapes on the corner, but they're looking a bit Lindisfarne manuscript-like. So I'm going to take those off and liberate my bird so it looks as though it's just in the sky and it's not restricted by corner shapes. And because I've deconstructed it, the tail looks as though it's coming adrift slightly. But I'm now manipulating the pre-felt, which I dyed a little months ago, actually. And I'm putting my hand on it and stretching it slightly. I should have wet it beforehand, but I think I've already tried that with this pre-felt before. It's already stretched because it's got quite thin parts. So it's going to be interesting to see how it felt down.
Well, I used a similar piece of pre-felt, didn't I? And when I was laying mine out, I wet it and stretched it.
Mine is left over from a job that I did.
Oh, I see. Right.
And yours is unused.
Pristine.
Right. But dyed.
Hand dyed. That makes sense.
Because I like hand dyeing the felts. And they're sort of slightly variegated. Variegated. And I've got a little white eye on my bird, which...
I noticed that.
Maybe it should be black eye because it looks a bit like a dead fish. What do you think, a black eye? It needs to have something, and I don't want to needle felt into afters because I'm not so fond of needle felting.
Unless, of course, you had just a hole, a circle.
Oh, well, let's give it a hole.
And then if you don't like the hole, you can put something in the hole.
I could do. Got to be very accurate and get the eye in the right place. So we all know who's going to get the blame if this...
Oh, well, I'm not going to be here probably when, you're
I don't know.
You're
I can track you down
blame.
in a virtual studio. That is easier to us both.
Okay. Well,
actually, it looks really good. Although I am now reminded of a Venetian mask. The Venetian masks, the very long ones.
That's right.
The doctors wore.
What you could do, though, is perhaps put another colour in behind it to give a stronger eye without it being just... Put the white underneath that and see how it looks. Because it might be a little bit more subtle.
Okay, Heather, I'll give you that one. That looks really nice.
Oh, good. Excellent. It probably would look very similar either way, but it somehow
looks a lot better.
It does seem more involved.
Half of it,
yes, integrated.
So now I'm just going to wet it and roll it. And I might be using the edges.
There may not be a great deal of definition here because these colours are quite similar. And I think what's going to be interesting is that I know that I tend to fool things harder than you do, so it'll be interesting to see where the design looks at its best before. Because my designs tend to get eaten a little bit because I fool it really hard. We shall see.
We shall see. We shall see. Yes, I think my wings could be longer.
Right.
Is that a metaphor for life?
My wings could be longer. Well, yeah, that's a possibility.
Okay, I'm going to now wet it down.
Yep.
With our nice soapy water with olive oil soap that we've had brewing since we started.
Yes.
And we started
quite some time ago.
3 hours ago, in fact. So I'm going to use the netting that is already nice and wet and soapy because Heather used it earlier. So that's quite handy, isn't it, to be slightly staggered in rolling out and preparing. So I'm just wetting mine down and running my hands across it now. Well, actually I'm paddling, a bit like duck's feet, running my hands across it because I've only got 2 layers of finely teased out merino wool, one of which I've used straight from the roving and the other one I've used hand carders and got a nice blend going, and I put some sari silks in and some lovely viscose, sort of turquoise viscose, and I tried really hard to stay away from blue,
but you didn't succeed.
No, nobody's going to believe because hey, my bird is blue and the background is turquoisey green.
It's verging on blue in places, I would say.
Well, when you live here, all you see is sky, and then there's the river,
yes,
and a bit of field in between, and urbanisation. But I shut my mind to urbanisation.
But do you find then that your colour schemes are very much based on? Because mine vary. It depends just what colours. Sometimes I look at all the colours that I have.
Yeah.
And I just say, right, I'm going to try that, that, and that. And I haven't necessarily worked with those 3 before. So, I made that peg bag.
Oh, yes.
And I just picked out colours more or less at random to see how well they would work together.
And how do you feel that went? I mean, it looked beautiful.
I think it went okay, actually.
How did you feel?
And I like the fact that I don't think there are any colours that don't go together. I think it's just a question of quantity and the blend. And I love the fact that the background will influence the foreground and harmonises the whole piece. And therefore, in a way, you can use any colour, surface colour, because it will be harmonised by what comes through from underneath. It's kind of the tweeding, heathering effect, isn't it?
Yes, and what I love about tweed is that, I mean, traditionally it was dyed from plants in the landscape. So all of those, of course, went together and they were natural dyes.
So I think when it came to our felting, when we came down to see you, I had been back to Orkney and looked at the jewellery again, and I thought I'd love to reinterpret, because the original designs that Ola Gorie used, or many of them actually, were carved in stone, which
Yes.
just seems like such hard work. And then she takes them into silver, which again, it's although they are the finished product is quite simple and it's got strong lines. It's quite intricate at the same time because I discovered that when I was trying to do it in felt that, for example, the spirals, there are several more coils to the spiral than
Mm.
I managed to achieve. And therefore I'm thinking, I want to make it as intricate as the silver. And if you want to keep it to scale, then it becomes even more difficult because I'm looking at the one that we did together and I'm thinking it's not intricate enough. So how do I make the fine spirals? I've made a couple of these samples now. The second one I've made actually for the felt swap, and I like it, but I feel I need to push it further. And when we were discussing what we'd done, you felt the same way, that you had things that you wanted to improve upon the next time you look at
Absolutely,
the.
yes.
And what made you choose that? Because um, for me, it was to do with the designs that were in the tombs or on the
Yes.
walls or whatever. So that's what I've chosen from Skara Brae to work with. You chose one of the zoomorphic motifs. So what drew you to that one?
The thing about looking at jewellery is that it's a different medium. So what Orla can achieve with fine metalwork is really technically challenging, as we're discovering in felt work. But that's part of the exploration of the subject. The bird appeals to me because I I love myths and legends, and I love the Norse legends and Odin, and the fact that birds are messengers,
Mm.
and you get the ravens and you get other birds and doves and so on. And throughout different cultural stories, they are messengers, and they connect different worlds. So they can connect um, the afterworld with the living world, and they connect different times with the past, the present, the future. Um, and so I find that resonates with me, with my uh, sort of cultural childhood and the immersion of stories that I grew up in my education. And uh, a bird, of course, has all of this flight and freedom and movement. I literally looked at the piece of jewelry and I tried to recreate that form in felt. But I'm already thinking what I'd like to do is to separate those pieces, so to have a greater distance between the head and the wings and the tail, and have more movement in it and move it round. So moving it slightly from stylized. I mean, I think that it would be possible to express a bird just almost with the wings.
When you were talking about freedom and movement, and then you think, well, actually, how often are wings taken as a symbol and then transposed onto, for
Mm, of
example, a horse? So you've got Pegasus, or onto
course.
angels,
Yes.
sort of these mythical humans, if you like, fairies. So your wings are really
Yeah,
important, aren't they?
absolutely. Well, they enable um, something to move between different landscapes, different worlds, different contexts.
Mm,
So that all of that really appeals to me.
yeah.
And also just the expressive movement, a line, a dash, or it can be very tight
Hmm.
and real, like a bird. And I was thinking of developing that in uh, Nuno felting pre-felts, and then putting that onto different backgrounds.
I've been talking about some of the problems that I have when I am superimposing pre-felts onto felt a background and then they get lost. What problems do you envisage with Nuno felt and these motifs?
It's creating the right space. So when I'm laying out Nuno felt, I use my fingers to measure between the pieces of fabric. So if I want them to be close, I'll put one finger. If I want a little space and have felt in between the fabric, I'll put two fingers, and so on. So it would be so that it really shrinks and is in relief, so that the symbol, the pattern is in relief, and the background is slightly lower.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's a technical aspect of having the spacing right to
And if
allow for
you
that to still, for the pieces to still connect, but not to be touching each other.
and Nuno felt, I presume you're thinking of this as being wearable.
Yes, possibly. Yes, I mean it. It
Well,
could be in a hat. It could be in a
oh,
waistcoat.
okay, okay.
Could be
Because
in a
if it's
scarf.
wearable, then obviously the design, the placement of the design is going to
Oh
be really
yes,
important.
yes, yeah.
How will that translate into something wearable?
Interesting.
Or
Well,
will
what I
it?
don't want is just a bird across the back. A
As
bit like
angels.
a bit like a denim jacket or something
Yeah,
with
yes,
some
but
wings on
that's
it.
that is a real challenge in wearable
Maybe,
art.
maybe a little feature on a pocket or a
Uh-huh.
collar. It doesn't have to be all of it.
No.
It could just be a small area of it that would actually lie flat, or it could be the whole pattern, and then you have to take it off and explore the story to see
So
it.
it could be a repeated motif.
Mm,
I mean, all of these things are why we have to do samples, really.
mm, yes.
So I think this is probably a great place for us to stop. And I hope that our listeners have enjoyed us, just talking about felt. Yeah, a lot of talk about felt and a bit about Orkney as well. So thank you for listening and to you, Vivienne, for hosting this wonderful workshop that we had.
We had a great day, and you can see how much you can get out of felting with a friend,
Mm,
and then you've got doubly experience and doubly ideas.
that's right.
Thanks,
And
Heather.
all right. I can't think of what to say now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Yes, let's just say goodbye and thank you for listening to the podcast where felt matters. This podcast is brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. Conceived, hosted and produced by Vivienne Morpeth and Heather Potten. Editing by Heather Potten. Music by Artie Williams. Graphics by Rafaela Morpeth.
If, like us, you'd like to hear more from our amazing felting community, subscribe at the end of this episode. It helps other creatives to find us, and each episode will drop into your podcast platform for you to enjoy.